So good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. Thanks for being here for today's webinar from reactive to strategic, positioning your healthcare recruiting for success. We're going to be diving into an issue that is top of mind for nearly every healthcare leader right now, especially in skilled nursing, home health, and other post-acute long-term care spaces. We're talking about recruitment, and not just any recruitment. We're going to explore how to move beyond putting out fires and starting to build that long-term proactive hiring strategy that grows and adapts with your organization. So first, let me just do a little bit of housekeeping before we dive in. Please use the chat or the QA box for any questions during the session. There should be a quiz that has popped up as well. You're welcome to fill that out as you see fit. We're going to leave some time at the end for question and answer as much as we can. Yes, the webinar is being recorded. Yes, you will receive the session afterwards. If you message me privately and ask that question later, I promise not to call you out by name. Let me start off by introducing myself. Hi, I'm Morris Isaacson. I'm the EVP of Marketing and Sales here at Empeon. At Empeon, we help healthcare organizations, like many of yours, gain control, clarity, and confidence in your healthcare management, workforce management. We know that building a high-performing healthcare business doesn't just happen. It takes strategy, the right people, and the right tools. That's why we're here today. Before we get into that, just a quick preview of coming attractions. Since the Powwow Healthcare Show started 3 years ago, Empeon has been a proud main sponsor, and we're back again this year to the newly renamed Thrive event in September. It's one of the top conferences for long-term care, and we're going to be diving into additional strategies for tackling workforce shortages. Plus, we are hoping to have some new product announcements. More on that, but I don't want to ruin the surprise. And speaking of surprises, Eric, I hope you like that segue. It's no secret that healthcare recruitment is under more pressure than ever. More than half of healthcare executives say that workforce shortages are one of their top barriers to growth. That means that if you are still hiring in reaction to shortages, you're definitely not alone, but it's more than likely costing you time, money, and worst of all, degrading the quality of care of those patients. I know everybody here is very smart and has heard a lot of this before, but tell me if this sounds familiar to you. You know, scrambling to fill last-minute shifts, depending heavily on job boards or staffing agencies, even when the results aren't worth the cost, chasing candidates instead of attracting them, and high turnover that drives up labor costs and impacts the quality of care. Like I mentioned, receiving reactive hiring often means leaning heavily on expensive agency and travel nurses. That can drive up the cost of labor by 20 to 50% per shift, which is a crazy number. And that's not all. High turnover doesn't just hurt your budget, it impacts the quality of care, like we've mentioned. Studies show that when turnover drops, patient outcomes improve, satisfaction goes up, and overall ratings climb. Okay, so since you've heard all that before, let's talk about what we're going to do about it. Here's where the good news starts. A strategic recruiting model can flip the script, helping you predict hiring needs and build an employer brand that attracts top talent so you don't need to chase it, and create a proactive talent pipeline that keeps you ahead of the curve. And that brings me to our guest today, Eric Adelman. Eric is an executive coach who has a deep understanding of recruiting since 2006, where he built an industry-leading multi-million-dollar technology recruiting firm. Today, Eric is the CEO and founder of Medical Talent Pros. He partners with healthcare organizations nationwide to help them quickly and successfully fill critical roles with top-tier talent. His experience spans the full recruiting spectrum, from building systems that attract high-quality candidates to coaching leaders on how to sustain those results long-term. Eric's seen firsthand how strategic recruitment can transform both operations and patient care outcomes. So without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Eric Adelman. Hey, Eric, great to have you with us today.
Nice to be here. Thank you so much for the for the kind intro.
My
Um,
pleasure.
it's really interesting. You mentioned that, like, I think you said 50% of healthcare leaders think that recruiting is like a big problem for them. And
Yeah,
I mean, I would hazard a guess that it should be like very, very close to 100. Because recruiting is a problem for everybody. It's a problem that's like germane to the business. And it's not going to go away anytime soon. And I think the companies that put in place something proactive to deal with their recruitment challenge, which is, again, that's part of running a business. Just like you have a challenge in getting new patients in the door, that's not going to go away anytime soon. You also are going to have a recruitment challenge that is a constant. So companies that address that proactively are the ones that are going to win.
Excellent. Thank you. So, Eric, let's sort of set the stage here before we talk about strategy. For someone who's responsible for recruitment and maybe also retention in the healthcare industry, what exactly does that mean? What are some of the common challenges for people in that role?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is number one is it has to be an organization-wide thing. It can't just be that like we have an HR person, we have a recruiter, they sit in their office, they look through the applicants, they do the interviews. Like that's what they do, and we do like the real work of patient care over here. It needs to be a cohesive strategy of, yes, there is somebody who's in charge, quote unquote, of recruitment. But the more it can be like, starting at the top and going all the way to the bottom. I don't mean bottom in terms of level necessarily. It's like the entire organization needs to be focused on we have great people here that enables us to provide great care. And that mantra needs to exist. Otherwise, you're usually just going to be stuck in the subsistence cycle of looking through resumes of CNAs and floor nurses and constantly needing more and then going to agency and paying a huge amount of money and then those don't work, that's not a long-term solution. Then you hire somebody but they don't work out because there's no cohesive culture. All of those things create like I don't know, I feel like the tension in my shoulders just talking about it. So like, and I think most healthcare professionals feel that same thing. Like, and they're like, and then we found this great three nurses, and two of them left for an extra quarter an hour, and one of them left for 35 cents more an hour. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with that? So that's how everybody, I think, I'm just describing the problem that I think anybody who's in this webinar probably is already aware of and already feels. But I think it's important to address that. You have to realize that that's not a way to run the company indefinitely. And there need to be, cohesive strategies.
Yeah, I hear that. Okay, so you talked about reactive recruiting. I definitely hear the vicious cycle, the tension. What's the solution to that? How do you break the cycle?
Okay, so number one is you need to decide, okay, we are focusing on recruitment. That's a decision. Then it needs to go from not just the recruiter, the owners. If the owners are involved in anything, if the owners, first of all, if they want to grow, we didn't even talk about this, but if the owners want to grow the value, I don't know if we have any owners here. If the owners want to grow the value of the company, focusing on recruitment is like one of the best ways that I can think of that's possible to do that. If you have a stable workforce, you're going to just everything is going to be much more stable. So if you put that into perspective at the beginning, that's number one. Number two, I see a lot of operators that just don't have any kind of good systems, like nothing. Like they're managing candidates that come in an inbox of a recruiter that nobody's really managing, and there's no focus on creating a sustainable pipeline. The first thing to recognize is that you can't just post a job when you have an open role and then try to play catch up and get that person in place. That can work once or twice, but it's not going to work for the long term. So you need to constantly realize, like, plan out what what are you going to need over the next month, over the next quarter, over the next year. And you can set, there's nothing wrong with using job boards. Like there are great candidates in healthcare on job boards. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can't make them apply today. So if you're pipeline hiring and say you have an applicant tracking system of sorts, so any kind, really anyone is fine, to keep track of everybody. And then understand what stages people are in. So somebody might have just applied, you don't have anything for them, but you want to bucket them into a certain slot as a CNA, as an RN, as a, whatever their position is, so that you develop a pool of talent that you can always reach out to whenever you have an open role that's coming up or that's an emergency. And that way, somebody's already familiar with you. You can market to them as a long-term strategy. So they can get emails, they can get texts from you as on a group level, asking them if they know about this type of program you have, that type of program you have. Just being in their face and being a place where everybody knows about in your neighborhood. So being able to capture them, then being able to market to them, and then most importantly, like celebrating this amongst your staff. Your staff that's one of the best things that I think you can do as an operator, is to really make sure that you're providing a good amount of money for an employee referral. Employee referrals are way cheaper than agency. They're way cheaper than even posting on Indeed. They're way cheaper than paying a recruiter to refill a position over and over and over again. So that's a really good strategy. And the last like practical and tactical thing that I want to mention is you definitely need to think about what makes this a great place to work. It cannot just be about the money because you probably have an approximate ceiling of what you can do money-wise. The other things, the softer things, which are the cheapest and most difficult to do, those are usually what makes all the difference. And that's what makes somebody love where they work. And that the retention is like that's the key thing. The reason why you're having to constantly fill open positions is almost always not due to organic growth. That would be great. It's usually due to turnover.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love the employee referrals. Is that something you've seen working with, people you've worked with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's literally any company, but for healthcare in particular, it gives you something to talk to the staff about where it's not just like, do you know anybody? And they say, no, I don't know anybody. Like do you want $250 or $2,500? That like that you don't need to sell the opportunity to somebody for whom that's a decent amount of money.
Sure. Yeah. I know, especially with so many in the long-term care space that are looking to reduce their reliance on staffing agencies. There's some new incentives with one big beautiful bill that incentivizes W-2 with additional employer, tax credits. Is that right?
I've heard, I'm not an expert on that, but I know that there are new things that have come out in the last month. Bottom line is the government wants to incentivize people to hire full-time permanent employees, not contractors. That's the general gist of it, I think. And at the same time, even without the government incentives, you want people that are attached to your company, that love your building, that love your staff, that love being a part of this. So if people don't want to be a part of it, yeah, somebody offers them another quarter an hour, they'll leave.
Right.
So you want to prevent that.
So, I think the concept makes sense to in terms of moving from being reactive to being strategic, but how does an organization go from saying, okay, we love the ideas, how do we put them into play?
So number one is it can't just be something that lives with the recruiting team or HR. It just simply can't. Otherwise, you'll be stuck in where are my candidates? I posted the job, you have a budget, where's my nurse? It needs to involve the executive director, it needs to involve the ownership, it needs to involve the heads of department, and they need to be working directly. I would say there should be a once a week meeting it could be a 15-minute meeting with recruitment to talk about what the needs are that are coming up, what the needs are that they have right now, how different roles are going, and to get everybody like talking about it and thinking about recruiting. If you just like sweep it to the side and say like, all right, when we have a role, we'll call so and so. It's not usually going to be a priority. So the successful organizations are always recruiting. So number one is making it a priority amongst everybody else who's a leader in the company for sure, and even those they're going to push it down to their team. Um, you need to make it a place where people want to be. That is the key to retention. You could pay them, you could overpay them by 2x. And if people don't like working there, they're still going to leave. So retention is like the second kind of key to making sure that you're not constantly backfilling positions. By the way, there's nothing wrong with using agency occasionally. I think it's just
Right.
the over reliance on agency. There's this big push I've heard recently where people want to make their building agency free, and that's an admirable goal. I don't think it's necessarily one that every organization needs to strive towards. I would say that maybe you're going for 95% of our roles are filled internally. And we have somebody who's great that we rely on for an emergency. And when it's an executive level role or a head of a department or somebody we need to add, then that's when we get called, to fill a full-time permanent position. We're not an agency. We don't fill shifts. That's not our business. At the same time, there is value to those organizations. Um, the other thing to do is to really map out the process of how somebody comes to work for your company. What is the interview process? There's so many companies that start off interviewing candidates and they don't really think, okay, well, who's meeting with the first step is a phone call with so and so. The second step is an in-person meeting. The third step is an offer letter. How many steps are they and who's in charge of them? Um, I can tell you like I had a skilled nursing facility we were working with recently that they didn't really have approval. I didn't realize till halfway into the process that they didn't really have approval for the budget. If you're spending all this time and effort having multiple people on your team meet with candidates, you sure as heck better understand like what your budget is. And if you don't set that up beforehand and have buy-in from all of the stakeholders, you're usually going to get like a muddled process that's not going to go as swiftly as it could. And the candidate is going to pick up on that, and they'll usually end up going somewhere else where everything went exactly how it should have gone. And at the same time, you don't want to skip steps. So if it's important to you that they meet with person A, B, and C, and make sure that they meet with person A, B, and C. Don't skip the step because it was a slightly inconvenient time. Um, the other thing that I would tell you, KPI tracking and like continually looking to improve on that is really important, and that always gets lost in the shuffle because it doesn't necessarily get you a hire directly right now. But I think like over the course of time, like where are candidates dropping off in the process, and how long are they staying with us once they're hired? So if somebody's dropping off after the first phone call, but before the in-person interview, that's where you might have a problem. Maybe you're not confirming the interviews properly. Maybe you're not communicating with them in a way that makes it seem like this is an opportunity that they want. All of these things, if you're tracking it and you see we had 38 candidates go through the process, we lost 12 at this stage, 14 at this stage, and the rest we hired. Like it would tell you where to focus your efforts. But if you're not tracking any kind of KPIs around hiring, then you're probably not going to really know what's wrong. Um, One more point that I'll mention, just in terms of that's really key to the hiring process. Do an exit interview with people that leave. They will tell you why they did not want to continue their employment with you. I was about to say why they hated you. That's a strong term. Um, if they left the company, there's a reason, and they're often pretty open about sharing it. And even if they're not so open, they'll share. You can read between the lines. Those are things that should be, and then you can bring up those points in the regular weekly recruitment meeting. That again is nobody likes meetings. It's 10, 15 minutes of the leaders of the company talking about recruiting, which is like one of the top, if not the top thing that is going to drive the success of the facility.
Yeah, no, those are great tips. I really like that, especially the exit interview. I feel like that's a tremendous opportunity to learn and be able to grow from that transition. Um, Talk to me a little bit about tech. What do I need to have under the hood, so to speak, to make strategic recruiting a thing?
Well, first of all, tell me how Empeon fits into that.
Yeah, so at Empeon, we have sort of a full human capital management solution, everything from recruitment, ATS, onboarding, HR, really able to manage the entire employee life cycle.
Okay. So all of that said, you need to have a strategy. Number one, you need to have an ATS of any kind. In terms of technology, one of the things that I've found most impactful practically is that the people who you're looking for at every level, they're going to respond much better to text than anything else. Text is still king, I find, in healthcare. I don't know if you see the same thing.
Oh yeah.
More so than any other industry. You could call, email, you have to figure out your method of reach out. But being able to text candidates individually en masse and have that be tracked inside of whatever your individual ATS is, that's really key. I always hesitate to talk about specific tech tools because everything integrates with everything else differently. And it's not usually applicable for any one individual person who's watching this. But having a tool to text candidates is really important, and being able to slice and dice your candidate pool within your ATS. It often is not as much about tech as it is about like optimizing the candidate pool that you have, um, and then taking that out of the computer and then like into the building. So if somebody's sent you 3 referrals this month of friends from nursing school who could be interested in employment, like that's something that should be celebrated. It should be done publicly. Like everybody else should know about it and say like, I want what she got. And they almost always can refer somebody. if I found this with my own staff, and I always advise my clients to do this too. It's you can ask people like every single week. You think like, well, I just asked them last quarter. I know you're asking me about tech, and I'm going off onto back onto the employee side. But I think it's really intentional because I don't, in my opinion, I don't think the tech is there yet to make the people just appear.
Right. No, I understand. It really is all about driving the people, and like you said, creating that culture of being a place where people want to work and want to refer. Good people refer good people. So you want to tap into that and tap into it on a consistent basis. You talked about, no one wants more meetings, but maybe give me a little bit more on strategically, how can I get more buy-in across the whole organization rather than it just being, recruitment focused.
Sure. So I think that whenever somebody brings up a challenge that they're having in doing their work properly, there's I would say at least 50%, probably more like 80% of the time, there's going to be a tie-in to if we had the right people, this wouldn't have happened. And that's there's always an opportunity if you're looking for it to make sure that recruiting is front and center and like top of mind for everybody. And then it becomes a team problem to solve as opposed to it's the recruiter's job to look through the resumes and make the people be here or we go to an agency. I think that's the most important way. It has to be recruiting has to be something that's celebrated, and it has to be the team has to be a team that cares about itself. That's what's going to make somebody turn down the recruiter's call for the job that pays more per hour. That's what you have to think about. What is going to make somebody want to be here more than picking up the call from the recruiter that is coming every day? They're getting those calls whether you like it or not. Just like you're calling other people's employees, so are they. And their resumes on Indeed. If you go on Indeed and search, you'll find your employees' resumes too. That's just the way the industry is. But you need to make them decide proactively, I'm not taking the call. I love where I work.
I like that. Just a reminder to folks, there is a poll. You can click on the poll button and give us your feedback. Anyone who wants to take time for that. Maybe, Eric, if you could talk a little bit about metrics. So, turnover in a multi-location skilled nursing organization, they deal with a tremendous amount of turnover, I'm sure. What are some of the recruiting metrics or the retention metrics that they should be keeping an eye on?
Sure. And I think the first step, by the way, is to get a baseline of where your facility is right now. Number one is you want to look at the number of days it takes you to fill an open position. Percentage. Number two is percentage of positions that you had to use somebody outside, whether it's a recruiting firm or an agency. Those are important things. Again, whether it should be 0% or 5% or 20% is up to your organization. And that those metrics can change, but you have to be tracking them. Um, and I think the most important thing is what are we spending on recruitment? Because when you see that number and that's your recruiter's salary, that is all of the money you spend on Indeed, all the money you spend on LinkedIn, all the money you spend going to trade shows to recruit people or to job fairs. All of those things go into it, and I think companies oftentimes they think we're spending so much money on recruiting, and when they look at it, it's kind of the redheaded stepchild of the company. They don't really want to spend any money on it because people should want to work here. Why not? We're a great company, but you haven't necessarily done anything to put any resources behind that. So you should know how much you're spending. That's like on the macro recruitment side. And then when you look at the steps of the recruitment process with candidates, where people fall off is really important. So each step of the process from reaching out, cold reach out to them, getting them into your system, how many people stop at that point. Then the next step of the process, scheduling a phone call or a Zoom, how many people drop off at that point. Getting them into the building for an in-person interview, how many people drop off at that point. After that, if there's another interview, how many people drop off there? If there's not, offer letter, where do people drop off on onboarding or credentialing? These are all points to measure, and if you'll see real patterns when you start to measure the data, and you don't need anything complicated to measure it either. Like I'm a big fan of like simplicity because these are simple points. They're easy to describe. It just requires effort to measure them.
Yeah. One thing we've seen is the amount of time it takes to onboard a new hire. So you've made them the offer and then getting them really up to speed. We've seen numbers over 30 days, some people 90 days to complete the onboarding for a new hire. Is that too high? Is that, just right? Talk to me a little bit about that process.
Sure. Well, I mean, it is position dependent because if there's credentialing involved, sometimes it is out of your control. Like for example, we work with a company that's looking to hire a telehealth nurse. They need to be credentialed in a certain state. There are not that many candidates in that state, so they're looking out of state, and it's going to be a 2 or 3 month process. So that wouldn't be a flag for a role like that. But if you're in a standard city in a regular market and people are already credentialed and that's not a part of this, you should be able to get people onboarded from the time they sign an offer letter. It should be an average, I would say, I don't know, 20 to 30 days on average, something like that. But if you're going 90 days, I mean, there's what would cause that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know, but we're seeing it, just from people self-reporting. Um, so talk to me, I guess, a little bit about getting started. So someone's heard these points. They're on board with you, right? They understand. Let's make it a great place to work, but maybe it's overwhelming to sort of take it all in one fell swoop. What are some immediate concrete steps, baby steps to get started in this direction?
Sure. So first things first, you need to be able to answer that question as a company. What makes this a great place to work in one sentence? If you can't answer it, you're not going to be able to verbalize it to candidates as a recruiter or as a hiring manager or as somebody who wants to refer their friend. And you need to be able to verbalize that. What makes this an amazing place to work? So, like one interesting thing I saw in the press recently was Monarch. They're a group out of I think Minnesota. So they had a structure where they said, listen, the COVID retention bonuses are over. We're going to offer people $100,000 bonus, to work here. Well, wow, that's a huge amount of money. So how are they structuring? The devil's in the details, and how they're structuring it is important, obviously. But they're giving a quarterly bonus paid out per paycheck, and obviously nobody's getting. Let's be real. Nobody's getting. It's a little bit of a clickbait type of headline, but it makes people think. Wait a minute, what's the catch here? And it shows that they're forward thinking. They're thinking about their employees. They want to get people's attention. Their competitors aren't doing that. And it makes them stand out. So what it means is they're building in raises so that people don't have to come and beg for them. That's really what it means. And I think that's an important point that everybody could get behind. So that's just an example. I'm not saying to copy that strategy, although you could. The point is that you have to have something. We do a monthly outing and we go out together as a team in different shifts. We have lunch for this. We support this charity organization. We go out and build Habitat for Humanity as a group every quarter. There's something like that, and these things don't need to cost a lot of money. They usually don't. A company that I used to run, we brought in puppies one day from a shelter, and everybody had like high-powered like sales guys playing with puppies on the floor. It was great. Everybody loved it. It cost nothing. And it was like super memorable. That's what people put on their Instagram. That's what people tell their friends about. They don't tell their friend, I worked 312s this week. It was great. Like, so those are the things that are the most important that you can think through what makes this a great place to work. If you don't have a clear answer to that across the organization, you might not have a great place to work.
Right. Yeah, and that's got to be the absolute priority. One of the things I've seen was where they took that sort of professional development budget and basically handed it back to the staff and said, "Look, there's a pool of money. Instead of us telling you that we're going out on a hike, you tell us. How do you want to spend that money? Do we want a big party? Do we want to, trickle projects out here and there? But kind of giving the staff a little bit more of a voice in that process, I think, goes a long way."
Yeah, absolutely. And putting somebody in charge like who wants to do it. Like I mean, personally, I'm not great at planning those kind of things. I never would have come up with that idea. It wasn't my idea. It was the planning committee said like here are the three things we came up with for the month. And that's what we did. So
Yeah.
I think that just focusing on the group and focusing on the team, all of that helps your retention and reduces your need for recruitment. And it also helps your recruitment because people then want to refer their friends to a great place to work. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the key takeaway. I know we're kind of pushing up on time here. Any last thoughts or takeaways that you want to reinforce for our audience before I ask if there are any final questions?
I think the most important thing is to treat recruitment like a real priority. If it's not a real priority, then you're going to get mixed results. You're going to get mediocre results, and it hurts your bottom line because you end up spending more money to replace the people that left. You get less. You don't get as good of a care. The care is not as strong, obviously, if people just got there 3 days ago than if they've been with the home for 3 years. So you're going to have better patient outcomes. You're going to have better employee retention. That all that feeds into the bottom line. It also just makes the place a good place to work. Nobody likes a revolving door where every day there's somebody new. So I think the more you focus on recruitment, it's a good engine to keep the entire company running. And if your recruitment stinks, and your retention stinks, you have a bigger problem that you have to address probably in the team and in the culture.
Thank you. So anyone who's participating, if you'd like to leave a question in the Q&A, we've got one already in here. Oh, and this is something we covered a little bit, but I know this is certainly an important topic. For those of us who depend heavily on agencies, what's a first practical step to reducing reliance without risking open shifts or care quality?
So the first practical step that you can take is to look at what roles you know you're going to need and just start posting them online on Indeed or ZipRecruiter or wherever your main candidate source is. That's what everybody's using, let's be honest. You can use LinkedIn too, but like for a regular position, that's not where you're going to go. Just put it on there with a low budget and have somebody who's constantly going to be calling those candidates, even if there's not an opening right now. That is the number one thing that you can do to just keep your foot on the gas on recruitment. You could start that today. You already have the job spec for a CNA. You already have a job spec for a nurse. You already have a job spec for dietary. Put these up there with I'm talking low money. Like if it's one facility, like a $5 a day budget. Like that's it. You could do more, obviously, and make sure that those resumes are being looked through on at least every day, every other day, if there's no particular role, and that good candidates get a phone call. Maybe there's no open role right now, and you can tell them that. Honestly, we don't have an opening right now, but this comes up all the time. Do you want to come by and see the building? You don't need to have an opening as long as you're honest with people and not tricking them. You can start that today. That is the best thing that you can do. That costs almost no money. It does take time, but that's what it takes to get agency out of the building as much as they're in there right now.
I like that a lot. And that way, when it does, in recruiting, what's going to be coming up. And so why wait for the problem and then start putting out fires? Be a little bit more strategic in planning there. One more we've gotten in here beyond better pay. What recruiting or onboarding strategies have you seen actually reduce burnout in roles like nurses and aides?
So what I've seen is people want to have fun together. That's the bottom line. Any team that's not having fun together, it's just a job, and they're going to get burnt out somewhat soon. And when they get burnt out, the question is what you're going to do to like shake them out of that and pull them back in. So team activities, that's number one. You can do that again. I always look for high impact, relatively low cost, no risk type of solutions. So doing an activity outside of the facility might cost you a few $100s, that type of thing. It shows your team that they care about you and it differentiates you from everybody else. And it just helps them reset. And then when they're having a really rough shift, 3, 4, or 5 days from now, they're going to go back to that place where they were bowling with the team. It's literally can be bowling. It doesn't take just ask people what they want to do to have fun. That's what it takes to reduce burnout. Where appropriate, like music also is great. Like sometimes you walk into a facility and it is just desolate and sad and it's not a fun place to be. And if there's music playing, that should be again when appropriate, not in the patient's room. That should totally be the case. It creates a fun atmosphere. And do you think that what the residents want to be in a place where everybody's down in the dumps? Like they'd rather have some music and turn that down is better than I'm sad and I don't want to be here.
No, for sure. And I think the team building idea is great. People when they go through that, then when they're in a difficult situation and you're asking someone else to sort of go above and beyond, it's not a stranger. It's not someone that you've just worked with exclusively. It's someone you broke bread with, you had some fun with, and the relationship and the dynamic is very different. Excuse me. Another question we have here. What's the best method to create a talent pool to constantly reach out to? So I guess that really underscores what you were talking about before. You want that constant outreach, but how do you create that talent pool so that you have those folks to be reaching out to? You mentioned, being on Indeed, even on the slow drip. Are there other ways to create that pool?
Yeah, you definitely should be whatever educational institutions are relevant that are nearby your facility. You should be there and you should have a presence there. It's a long slog because you have to have somebody. I mean, I don't know if anybody here has ever sat in one of those job fair booths. It's not all that much fun, right? For most people, there's some people that love it, and if you can find somebody that loves doing it from the facility, that's even better. If there's somebody who's not on shift right now that can go attend, who's a clinical person even, and even if they're a CNA, just somebody with a warm, bubbly personality, you should be there. And it's part of the long-term game. That's the instead of being reactive and looking to fill the role, being proactive and being at those any educational institution, any job fairs, you should be present. I think that also again, focusing on employee referrals, having a really strong employee referral program, that's something if you don't have that in place, that's a no-brainer to put in because it'll be cheaper. It also drives your retention with your current staff. Everybody likes getting a bonus for helping their friend get a job.
Right. Plus, now they get to work with their friend.
Exactly. So like it's a win-win all around. And it makes the job much stickier when somebody calls them and offers them a quarter an hour more, and they say, "Well, James not over there." So like, we're a team. We do great together.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you, Eric, and thanks everyone for participating. Thank you for helping us sort of position healthcare organizations for recruiting success. And it looks like we got one more question. I'm getting a lot of no-shows for direct support positions. How do I make my applicants want to come to fill out application and do the interview?
I'll tell you something that works amazingly well. You could decide if this is for you or not, but I have seen that it's successful. $10 Amazon or Starbucks card when you come to the interview. And tell them that beforehand. It drastically, I had a client that did this, and it drastically increases the number of people that show up. Now, it doesn't make them take the job, but they A/B tested, like they offered some, and it was a sizable organization where they really tested it. I can't tell you if it was statistically accurate or not, but they had way more. It wasn't even close. People showed up for the gift card because guess what? They have something else to do, some other interview, 17 people calling them, I'm going to get that gift card. Like that's a simple thing to do to prevent no-shows or reduce no-shows. You're always going to have a significant amount of no-shows, and that's a metric to track. So that, like we talked about earlier, where are people dropping off in the funnel? If you want a simple thing to do and you can calculate how many interviews you have per week or month or year, it's not really expensive. $10. It does make people show up.
I love it. Super smart. Okay, I think we're going to put a pin in it for now. Thanks everyone for participating, and the recording will get sent around as well. Thanks so much, Eric. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks so much.
Bye bye.